AMN DriveTime is sponsored by Aishin, your trusted and reliable source for aftermarket automotive components and technology. Visit AishinAftermarket.com for more information.
Brad, welcome to AMN DriveTime, sponsored by our great friends at Aishin.
Great to see you, Bill. Thanks for having me.
So this is a little unusual. We call this DriveTime on the road because we normally do this at our studio in Ohio. Right. But you and I now are at the Vision Conference in Chicago that starts this evening.
Yes, sir.
And so it's kind of fun. We're in a conference room here in Greater O'Hare area.
Yeah, great to see you, Bill. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Excited about the conference.
Yeah, it should be good. So Brad, let's start sort of kind of at the beginning. You're obviously currently the CEO at O'Reilly. You've had that job for about a little more than a year now.
Yes, sir.
But you've been there a long time. Walk us through your aftermarket career, which I think may be exclusively O'Reilly.
That's right. So I grew up in Oklahoma, and I was one of those kids in high school that I had a 68 Camaro and I had a dirt track car. And so like any naive, arrogant young man, I thought I knew more about cars than I really did, but didn't love school, Bill. And, I just felt like college was not going to be for me. And O'Reilly had put a store in my hometown in Oklahoma a few years prior to me starting to graduate high school and apply. And, fortunate for me, I think it was a little bit of a favor. One of my father's good friends was a good customer of O'Reilly. He had a construction company in my hometown, bought all his filters, belts, all his maintenance stuff, really big commercial account, professional account. And so I think it was a little bit of a favor, but I got the opportunity as a 17-year-old young man to start with O'Reilly, and I wasn't even 18, so I couldn't even drive a delivery truck. I couldn't make hydraulic hoses, all the things that you really needed to do. But really the local manager and the district manager gave me an opportunity, 17 years old, really just start out sweeping floors and putting up stock. And so that's how I got my start. And like you know very well, O'Reilly has this strong promote from within culture. And at the time, Bill, O'Reilly had less than 200 stores, and that was in 1996.
So less than 200 stores.
Yeah, I believe we had around 160, 170 stores when I started.
Wow.
Yes, sir. So started out at the ground level, and just through having some great mentors and having a lot of great parts people around me at the time that kind of put their arm around a 17-year-old kid and really showed me the way. So really had the opportunity in that first store to, over time, become a parts specialist. And again, like any young kid, you think you know more about parts than you really do, but thankful for a lot of veteran parts people. Back then, as you well remember, seems like yesterday, there was about 16 foot of paper catalog racks on the front counter. And a lot of your publications, I got my start reading Counterman, and if I could get my hands on, undercar, under hood, I would do it, because I really, frankly, fell in love with the business. Even if I was checking in freight back then, I would open up every box to see what was in that box. I mean, I just really fell in love with the business. I realized I didn't know near as much as I thought I did. Right. And I just loved even the smell of the store. I just really fell in love with it, and had all these veteran parts people that just really put their arm around me and taught me the business. And so really had every position in the store for the next couple years, just from counterperson, counterman to kind of a night manager. I kind of worked the night shift, and then had the opportunity to be an assistant store manager. And then just after we bought Hilo back in 1998, that I know you remember, we had about 200 stores at the time in 1998, and Hilo had 187. And that was really, we doubled the size of our company with that acquisition. And I had the opportunity to move down to Texas and be a store manager. And so that was something that...
To a Hilo store, was it?
Well, we had bought property in a town that was a non-Hilo market. We were going to Texas either way. We were actually going to go to Texas Greenfield expansion, and then the Hilo acquisition came up. So I did run my own new store which, by the way, I was not ready for.
So how old were you at that point?
I was 19 years old.
So 19 years old, you had your own store.
I did, but again, I want to say that I wasn't ready.
Were you the youngest store manager?
I think there may have been one or two others, but I would have been pretty close. But I make the point that I wasn't ready because I was so fortunate that the company promoted from within, but basically in Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas, kind of that 4-state area that, we came from. When I started with the company, we were just in those 4 states. We were starting to inch up to Ohio not Ohio, Iowa and Nebraska. And then we knew we wanted to go to Texas. And so there was a lot of people that were much more ready than me to run a store, but they had families and they were entrenched in that Oklahoma, Missouri kind of area. And so I just, I could load up my truck in about 10 minutes with my recliner and my TV and do whatever the company asked me to do. And so that's why I had the fortune of getting into store management and then, later on district manager, regional manager, and really have spent my whole career growing up in every level of store operations and sales.
Well, let me ask, were you ready to be CEO?
Absolutely not. I worry about people sometimes that say they're fully ready for a job because the ego can get to us from time to time. But, I don't think we're ever as ready as we possibly can be for any new responsibility. But I have had the fortune of working, around the O'Reilly family, guys that like Greg Hensley, Ted Wise, Jeff Shaw, Greg Johnson. I've had a lot of amazing leaders at O'Reilly that have done such a good job preparing not just me, but the next generation of the company for the next 5 or 10 years. So.
Well, there's some action there between it. There's more that happened there between running
sure.
a store. So
Yep.
Did you then run multiple stores, or how does that work? There must be a kind of
Yeah. There's a hierarchy of store operations. So our next rung up in store operations is what we call a district manager. So a district manager would run roughly 10 stores. It may be 8, it may be 12, but normally a district manager oversees 10 stores.
Okay.
And I did have that opportunity while I was still in Texas a few years after that.
Yeah.
And then after that, kind of our next rung up is a regional manager, a regional director that would oversee roughly 10 district managers or 100 stores.
Okay.
So I had the fortune of being mobile, being a young single guy. Hadn't met my wife yet. So I'd left the Texas market. We had spent from 1998 until close to 2001, really starting to backfill, get our arms around high-low, start to, incrementally add stores to Texas and Louisiana in their footprint. And then in 2001, we had another important acquisition that Mid-State Automotive Distributors. Back, really, as 90s, even into the 2000s, we were still an alliance member.
Sure.
And so we knew the guys out in Nashville with Mid-State, and that's where Greg Johnson, him and his father, Curtis, those guys were there with Bill Cherry. And that's where we acquired Greg Johnson, which is my predecessor. But I had the opportunity as we acquired Mid-State. We were starting to expand out east again, right place at the right time. The company had just asked me to go out. Actually went to the Kentucky market for a little while and opened up the Lexington and Louisville, Kentucky markets as a district manager. And then kind of to fast forward as we got our arms around Mid-State and we were starting to backfill, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Georgia, we knew our next distribution center was going to go in Atlanta, Georgia. And so, again, still young single guy, do whatever the company asked me to do. At the time, kind of a funny story, Bill, I ended up moving to Atlanta when we had no stores. We had no stores in Atlanta. We had virtually any stores in the Carolinas. We had a few stores in North Florida, but we really hadn't even started to build out the East Coast. And so at the time when I relocated to Atlanta, it was kind of one of those zero or hero conversations from Ted Wise and Jeff Shaw that, hey, Brad, you have the opportunity to move to Atlanta, critically important market. The only big metro markets we had been in at that point were Houston and Dallas, and we went to those through the acquisition of Hilo. Sure. So we had real estate, we had stores, we had people, we had distribution. Atlanta was going to be kind of the first big metro market that we had ever gone to, just surely through greenfield expansion. Yeah. and tough market, I mean, home of GPC Napa that we greatly respect, home of White Brothers and a lot of amazing WDs and an AutoZone Advance and you name it, every competitor on every corner. And so there was a lot at risk. It was an important market that we took very seriously. And the funny part of the story is, I thought at the time, mid 20s, late 20s, that I was who they picked to go to open the Atlanta market. I found out later I was like the 9th or 10th, but I'm the one that took them up on it. And so found that out later, but I consider Atlanta my second home because I was in Atlanta the longest with the company. I was there about 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
That's where I met my wife, started a family. And Atlanta and really the East and Southeast was a critically important part of our expansion, really from the time that I moved there in 2004, really up until today. I mean, we're still building out the important East Coast. But I had the opportunity as I moved to Atlanta. It was explosive growth. And I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a lot of great people. We had done a kind of a 7-store acquisition to open up that market. Adams Auto Parts, they were Napa jobber for a long time, and they went totally independent, and they were buying from Maudai at the time. But we had the opportunity to partner with the Adams family, and they had a lot of great parts people in that organization, and they were local. They were born and raised in Georgia, and they really helped me understand the Atlanta market, who we wanted to hire, who we didn't want to hire, and really was the people platform that we really needed to get our start.
Sure.
And so I feel very fortunate moving to Atlanta. I had the opportunity, back to your original question, to become a regional manager. So I was kind of overseeing all our expansion, not just in Georgia, but basically from Mississippi east, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and then on into the Carolinas. And because of our explosive growth and our DC opening in 2005 in Atlanta, I had the opportunity just a few years later to become a division vice president, which would kind of be our next rung up in store operations. So at the time, that was 2007. And at the time, we had 3 divisions in the company. Basically, Greg and Ted were running the old part of the company. Jeff Shaw had moved down to the high-low footprint, and out east was really our 3rd division. And so I had the opportunity to be our 3rd division vice president, overseeing store operations and sales for the East Coast. And now it's crazy for me to think, Bill, now we have 14 divisions, that make up our 6,300 stores.
Wow.
So really, after I did that, several years later, again, a lot of great people surrounded me. I had the opportunity to be basically a senior vice president overseeing all our East Coast. And people ask me all the time about when we acquired CSK, on the West Coast. You know that story very well. We acquired CSK back in 2008, and people ask me a lot, kind of, Brad, what was your role, in CSK? And I kind of joke, I was in Atlanta, and we were just really starting to catch our stride on the East Coast. And I always joke that when people ask me what my role is with CSK, Ted and Jeff, I remember asking them one time, hey, I'm out here. We just acquired, at the time we had 1,600 stores as a company, and CSK had 1,300. And so we almost doubled the size of the company again. But Ted and Jeff told me at the time, they said, Brad, you don't need to have anything to do with the West Coast. And what they meant by that was, it wasn't an insult. What they meant was, Brad, we have burned the ships going to the West Coast. We're going to have to install all these distribution centers. The culture at CSK is broke. The leadership wasn't what it should have been. A lot of great local people in those stores. It's going to be a perfect platform for us on the West Coast, but we're going to have a lot of risk. And we're still just getting started on the East Coast. So we're going to have all this focus and resources, time, and attention dedicated to the West Coast. We need you to run the wheels off the East Coast because we still have a lot of stake there. Right. And so my job at the time and our team's job on the East Coast was to open great stores, top line growth, open quality stores, the right store team members, the right district managers, the right regional managers as we expanded out east. It was all about quality of the teams you build. When you're in an expansion market, we work in a people business, and it's always about having the right people. So that was my job, is to really drive, top line sales growth, open really great quality stores on the East Coast, and obviously turn that into profitability. but more important than anything, really identify and develop the leadership team that could oversee the East Coast.
Sure, kind of take your spot.
Exactly.
And did you go from Atlanta to what happened after Atlanta?
Yes. So I relocated the company. Ted and Greg and Jeff. At the time, Ted Wise was starting to slow down. Ted was 45-year O'Reilly guy, grew up like I did. Ted was very instrumental in my career and a lot of our careers at O'Reilly. He went from driving a delivery truck and 45 years later was co-president with Greg Hensley and our COO. And he was always kind of my boss, a couple times removed, but he was always very instrumental in everything we were doing. And so he was starting to slow down a little bit, and Jeff Shaw, which was my direct boss the far majority of my career, was starting to take more responsibility. And so the company asked me to relocate from Atlanta to Springfield, Missouri, obviously where our home base is, back in 2013. Okay. And so I've been there, right at, going on 12 years.
What year did you get married?
I got married in 2012.
Oh, wow. So right before you left Atlanta.
Absolutely. So I had just got married and had my first son with my wife, Megan. So I had a one son previous to Megan, and now we have 5 kids. But I took my Georgia girl out of everything she knew in Atlanta. Her parents, that's where she went to college, that's where she grew up. And
she must have really loved you.
Well, I want to hope so, yeah. No, she did, and absolutely the same for her. And I have an amazing wife that we have the fortune of her staying at home with our kids. And she's a huge supporter of what we do at O'Reilly. And so she trusted me, and we picked up and moved to our hometown as O'Reilly to Springfield, Missouri back in 2013.
So how old are all the kids now?
So we have a pretty big range. So we have from 20 all the way down to 9.
Nice.
So yeah, we sure do.
Good for you.
Yep. And so really from there, Bill, to fast forward to now, just moved to the corporate office and was still overseeing the East Coast. I was just based out of Springfield, and then had the opportunity to kind of learn how we run the corporate office, the support departments, how we run professional sales from an administration standpoint, store operations from an administration standpoint, got exposed to merchandising, inventory control, more distribution operations, really just didn't have direct responsibility, a lot of those things, but was able to get exposed to really how we run all those things, human resources, real estate, things like that. And really just continued in store operations and sales. And then 2018, I had the opportunity to become our executive vice president of store operations and sales and take all of store operations from coast to coast. And then fast forward basically the last few years, Jeff Shaw retired, and I basically took his role as COO, and then Brent Kirby and I were named co-presidents at the same time. And then this last year, to your point, originally 14 months ago, I was named CEO and Brent Kirby was named company president.
Fantastic. What a great run, man.
Well,
it's not over yet.
Well, that's right. Well, at O'Reilly, we guys like me, there's so many men and women. I'm just one of many stories promote from within at O'Reilly. A lot of people don't realize this, Bill, but the O'Reilly family, Greg, David, Charlie, and Larry, and Rosalie, their vision when they took the company public was obviously they wanted to have access to capital to really grow the way they felt like they could grow, we could grow. But one of their visions that a lot of people don't realize is they actually kind of discouraged their kids from coming in the business. You think about, that second and third generation, you didn't ever necessarily see a fourth and fifth generation in our company. And that was kind of by design. The O'Reilly family, they really told their kids that, hey, go to school. Don't feel like you have to come in the parts business. Go to school. Go do what you want to do, because if you work in the parts business, you have our last name. We're going to be probably tougher on you than we are anybody else. Right. And we're going to give opportunities to non-family members. And so I'm just one of the many beneficiaries of this amazing culture, promote from within culture that we have that I think is extremely special. I think it's a part of our secret sauce. And, the O'Reilly family had this amazing vision that if they limited leadership to family only, they felt like they were going to stagnate the business. And so they wanted to give, guys like me an opportunity to be able to share in the growth and be a part of that that next generation of the company. So it's been a very something very humbling and something I'm very, very fortunate to be a part of.
So in March, O'Reilly announced a stock split to make its common stock more accessible to your team members, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to all the teammates to be able to share in the upside of the stock, right? And we talked earlier, it sounds like the teammates can buy it at a discount even when they're buying it. So talk about the value of the dedicated team of professionals. You had 6,300 stores, locations, 31 distribution centers. You talked about the culture, of course, but just talk about the people at O'Reilly and what's the profile of them and how they make it all work, and about the stock split, because it's 15 for 1, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. You have all that exactly right. Well, we're really excited about that. Yeah, to maybe touch on the culture. We actually started to document our culture back in 1998. And so that's the first time that we actually decided we're going to put this on paper. And it wasn't that the culture started, as you well know, in 1998. Sure. It started in 1957. But the O'Reilly family and folks like Ted Wise and Greg Hensley and all the great leaders of our company, they had gotten to the company to a point when we bought Hilo that they wanted to really just sit down and say, okay, we've had all this great success. We better write down and document the simple and basic fundamentals that have got us to where we're at. Because if we ever lose this family culture as we become a public company and we acquire other companies, if we start to dilute the culture that has really built our business, we're not going to be the same company.
Sure.
And so they started to really define the culture, and it was very basic culture values that still live today. Things like excellent customer service, things like teamwork, safety, win-win attitude. I could go on, but they're the basic things, the basic culture values that got us to where we were at from 1957 until 1998. And one of the very special things, I know we've already talked about it, that a lot of people don't realize about O'Reilly is, again, yes, I've had all these amazing promote from within opportunities, Bill, but so is everybody else. A lot of people don't realize that we have 650 of those district managers that I became back in the day. Not one of them came from outside O'Reilly. Every one of those district managers came from running a successful O'Reilly store. We have 75 regional managers. Not one of those came from outside O'Reilly. They ran a successful O'Reilly store, successful O'Reilly district, and now they're a regional manager. We have 14 division vice presidents in store operations. Not one of them has came from outside the company. They ran a store, district and region, and now they're division vice presidents. We have 4 senior vice presidents. They all ran an O'Reilly store, district, region, and division. And then Jason Tarrant, which took my old job in the last couple of years, he ran an O'Reilly store all on up the chain, and so did I. And so a lot of people don't realize we've never made an exception to that. And so the promote from within culture and our team members not only feeling like they're a part of the greater good and what we've built, but we actually want them to be shareholders, and we want them to have a stake in what they work so very hard for every day. That culture, promote from within. And so, as you know, a stock split in itself doesn't create value. We're trading for a little over $1,400. We've split our stock from 1993 until 2005. We split it 3 times, and we haven't split it in 20 years. And so the way that we're trading, we felt like now was a good time to go in and split the stock. And what that really does, even though it doesn't create value in itself, it does give our entry-level team members, we have 93,000 team members, and the far majority of them, 70,000 of them, are out there in the stores, on the firing line, in front of our customers. They have the most important job in our company. I don't have a job in my new role if it's not for these professional parts people and these store managers that are out there doing the real work every day with our DIY and our professional customers. And so we want them to feel like they can buy whole shares instead of fractional. Like our stock has ran up to this huge stock price, and we allow them through payroll deduction to basically buy our stock through employee stock purchase through our employee stock purchase plan.
Sure.
And they can do that at 15% below the market value. So they're immediately 15% ahead, not to mention the compounding effect. But as our stock has grown over the last couple of decades, it's gotten to a point where the entry level team member can just buy fractional shares, and we want them to feel like they can buy a whole share, for example, in a month, in a
Sure.
couple pay periods, something like that.
Sure.
And so this stock split is absolutely for our team members.
So all you parts guys, when you're out in Vegas, or do you like recite part numbers and show off? Like, can you still recite?
I try to.
Can you still recite part numbers?
Of course I can. I'm pretty rusty, but I like to still tell the story that there's plenty of part numbers that stick in my head. But the one that's pretty funny that always sticks in my head is I'd only worked for the company for a couple months, Bill, and our district manager was this old seasoned parts guy that grew up, selling parts around my hometown. And he was a great parts guy. He was a lot of fun to work the counter with. And he told me I was very young, I was very intimidated behind the counter, and he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." And he dragged me down the bearing and seal aisle. And in the store I started in was a rural market. There was a lot of tractors, a lot of ag, a lot of farm. There was a lake pretty close, and so a lot of boat trailers and things like that. And he dragged me down, and we had national seals, and he showed me this part number, 442-251. And he showed me this seal, and he said, "Hey, next time one of these farmers or somebody that's working on a boat trailer or something comes in with this greasy red rag and has these bearings and these seals in the rag," he said, I want you to remember this one part number, and 70-80% of the time this is going to be it, and you're going to look like a hero." And sure enough, I don't remember how much time went by. I think I went back there and put a little sticker by the 442-251 so I wouldn't forget it, and it's up here for forever. But I'll never forget, sure enough, this old timer come in one day, and he literally had the greasy red rag, and he was working on a trailer. And I went into a full-blown sprint back to the national section and grabbed that 442-251, matched right up. That was it. And I like to laugh about that, but those are the little things that just made me fall in love with the business.
Sure.
Because there was all these people around me that had so much more experience. So I didn't have their knowledge, but I knew I could hustle more than anybody else. And if I could learn these little things, I could build confidence. And that old man actually thought this young kid knew something, and so I'll never forget that, and I'll for sure never forget that part number.
My first job was selling tires at a Goodyear store.
Okay.
And at the time, 275 14s.
Yep.
That was about 75% of the action. So there weren't a million tires like there are today in 1985.
It's
so
proliferated.
275, 75,
Wow.
14, and we had a lot of them.
Oh my gosh, it's proliferated a little bit since then.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's great on the stock split. That's great for everybody.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about it, but we almost can't talk about it enough. So O'Reilly, you're big on company culture. You have said it's the most critical factor in the company's historic and future success.
Yes.
Digging deeper on the culture piece and prioritize teamwork, enthusiasm, hard work, customer service, excellent customer service.
Yes.
And I think part of it's got to be modesty.
Yeah. I think so. And really that all those things were modeled so well by Charlie, Larry, David, Rosalie. They just set such a good example for us. There was never any egos in the company. It can creep in every once in a while, but I think all the O'Reilly family, growing up here too, Bill. They never, success never got to the point where it was taken for granted. They were there. They were the generation that saw all the blood, sweat, and tears being poured in early on, and they just never took it for granted. We witness family businesses inside the parts business and outside that at some point it's handed down to a generation that just sometimes gets taken for granted, and that generation doesn't have the sweat equity that the original founders had. And so I think that lack of ego, that modesty, that kind of that underdog mentality, even though we are almost $17 billion company roughly in revenue, $75 billion market cap. We just don't think of ourselves internally that way. We still think of ourselves as a scrappy, independent, WD out of Springfield, Missouri, 4 states when I started, obviously ones before me go back further than that, but we just try not to ever lose that underdog mentality. I remember a cool story. It was one of my first leadership conferences. We have a leadership conference every year where we have all our store managers, district managers, really all store operations, sales leadership, and the leadership from the corporate office and distribution all come together under one roof. And of course, my first year, again, a couple hundred people, now it's 8,000 people under one roof. It's a huge deal. And we just went through our 2025 conference in January. But I remember I don't remember exactly what year it is, I'll get it wrong, but it was when we hit $1 billion in revenue. And that was one of my first leadership conferences. And Charlie O'Reilly, in his style, got up on the stage and he was being very humble and he was thanking all of us for everything we had done, the previous year. And he was talking about what he felt like was ahead of us, from a challenge and opportunity and marching orders really for the next year. And he congratulated us again when he got off the stage about the $1 billion in sales. But he said, team, what you can never do is get caught up in all these zeros. Because we can talk about $1 billion all day long, but all these zeros only happen one customer and one team member at a time. And you can never take that for granted. And I never forgot that. It still gives me goosebumps talking about it today because Charlie and the family and really everybody since then, we've always tried to stay grounded that without our customers and without excellent customer service and without our team members that are out there in the stores every day taking care of our DIY and DIFM customers, we don't have a company. We have nothing. And so that's a kind of another layer to our culture that it's a little bit intangible, but it's just this extra want to make sure that we never forget where we came from.
Yeah, very impressive. You just mentioned it. In January, you had your leadership conference,
yes,
right? And a number of supplier awards were given.
Yep.
And just talk about, you have a lot of people that sell you stuff. And I'm sure your supplier partnerships are very, very important to your success. In a competitive market, a lot of people want to do business with you. Talk about the vendors, suppliers you work with. It's got to be many hundreds, right?
Yes, sir.
Talk about that and how O'Reilly feels about them. How do you work with them? How do you get to be a vendor to O'Reilly, et cetera?
Great question. Love to talk about it because it's extremely important to us. First and foremost, win-win is one of those culture values that we've already talked about. And our supplier relationships, they have to be win-win. And there could be times that some of our principals may feel like it's one way or the other, but overall, our partnerships have to be win-win. If it's not win-win, if it's not good for them, then it's not good for us. And so that's a challenge, finding that win-win. But honestly, the first thing we really look for, Bill, and I'm going to talk to the group about it tomorrow while we have everybody here at Vision, is honestly, we look for similar values, in our suppliers. Before you can talk about fill rates or application data or catalog data or SKU coverage and all these things, we believe that you have to focus on a partner, a supplier partner that has similar values. And so honestly, we look at leadership, we look at stability, we look at ownership that really we feel like understands our business and is engaged and really has a company culture. It doesn't have to be exactly like ours, but we have to, I believe, to have a win-win partnership, we have to have similar values and vision for our future together. So that's first and foremost. The other thing we look for is as we've continued to sell a good mix of national brands and exclusive proprietary brands that we own, and we still have a very healthy mix. It's roughly 50-50. No matter which avenue we're going down, we're always looking for quality. One thing we've never done is our industry has has grown and continued to be very competitive. A lot of people say it's more competitive today. I don't know about that. I think this industry has always been competitive. I think there's been a lot of changing dynamics, but there's been a lot of end suppliers that have made exceptions to putting, lack of quality in a box and, in any one category. And while we've made mistakes and we have to watch that very closely, we have very tight quality controls on making sure whoever we partner with is doing exactly that. And so we believe in putting quality in the box. We believe in just simple things like communication and transparency, trust, again, back to our culture values. Obviously for the size we are today, not that there's not room for smaller suppliers, because we have a lot of amazing small suppliers that have a niche with us or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, for our larger categories, it has to be somebody that is really investing in their business, that is willing to scale with us and willing to invest not only in the current business, but what the technology and what the business needs to look like for the next decade.
Do you have any vendors that have been with you since day one?
We do, yep. I believe, I don't want to get it wrong, but the three suppliers that have been with us the longest is Standard Motor Products,
okay,
S&P, the Gates Corporation, and Wix Filters. Okay. And so I don't want to get the years exactly wrong,
understood,
but those three go back as far as anybody, and we still do business with all three of those today.
So they're iconic brands.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So I've heard you say on a couple of occasions you see great opportunity because it's a big market, there's a lot of market share out there. So this question kind of relates. What's your outlook for O'Reilly in 2025?
Yep.
And maybe the aftermarket in general, because I know you're kind of optimistic about things in general, right? Big market.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for us, everything starts at O'Reilly with our mission statement, and our mission statement has always been and will always be that we're going to be the dominant auto parts supplier in all our market areas. And that's not to be disrespectful or anything like that. That's simply we want to out-hustle and out-service the competition, because we feel like that's a good self-accountability, to making sure we're taking care of customers better than anybody else. And so it does always start with the total addressable market, in the U.S. And now that we have operations in Canada and Mexico, we look at the same thing. But, the way we view the market is it's a roughly $170 billion, market, addressable market for our side of the business. Obviously, service and everything else adds to a totally different size pie. But
and you got 10%.
We got 10%.
Billion,
yeah, pretty easy math. We got 10%. And so it's not in our DNA to allow weather or political environment, or, you go back to the way I was raised up, with the O'Reilly family and Greg and Ted and Jeff is when I grew up in store operations, like, you don't talk about weather. You don't talk about, you don't talk about it's raining. You don't talk about, it's an election year. You don't talk about, these things that aren't in our control. I mean, you think about the best sports teams, the best competitors. It's just always been in our DNA that we don't really we try not to talk about anything that's out of our control, because there's always more customers to go take care of. I remember making the mistake early in my career that I told Jeff Shaw that the shops were slow, that the installers were slow. He said, well, you better go get more slow shops then, and that's just kind of who we are. And so we've always had an eye on, we've got 10% of the market. So there's always more to go get. That said, in my role now, I have to be cautious. I have to, consider, when I answer your question, there's a lot of things in play. 2024 was not the best year for the aftermarket. We had some pressure on us. I think all of us felt that to some degree. I think there's been a lot of inflation that has came through in a lot of ways. Now wage inflation's kept up pretty well too, so I think that's offset somewhat. And then anytime we do go to speak out of the other side of my mouth, anytime the public and everyone in the U.S. goes through an election year, I think there is a certain, again, don't let my folks talk about it, but have to talk about, I think there's a little bit of uncertainty right now around a lot of things. And so I think people, our view, Bill, is that our consumer, the DIY consumer and the DIFM consumer are both still relatively healthy. But I think there's just been an element of caution, quite frankly. And so really, I think overall, we're set up as an industry for a good 2025, but I think there's been some signs that still point to kind of what happened in 24 that, there may still be a little bit of uncertainty. There may still be a little bit of pressure on some of our discretionary categories, maybe things that people can put off. And so sure. I just, to answer that question, I want to be balanced. There's always more to go get for all of us. It's a competitive market. But from an overall outlook and the way that we're talking to Wall Street, we release earnings for Q1 here in a few weeks. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at that time. But we're positive and optimistic, but we just want to remain cautious until we see maybe a few more signs of that customer totally coming around again.
So as CEO, you play a lot of roles.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of your time is interfacing with Wall Street?
Very small.
Very low.
Very small, quite frankly. And that's on purpose.
Sure.
I mean, we're the size company, we're not like a startup that has to spend a lot of time out on the road selling our stock. The markets are generally efficient enough that there's buyers and sellers for our stock at a certain price every day. And so we don't necessarily have to be out there proactively selling our stock. Sure. But obviously good investor relations are really good. And so our CFO, Jeremy Fletcher, and his VP of Finance and our Director of Investor Relations, they do spend a sizable amount of their time just with good investor relations, big and small. And then I make a few trips a year to, analyst conventions and conferences and,
Sure.
and things like that. So, our philosophy, it's not that we don't want to spend time with analysts and investors. It's our investors understand that my time well spent is back home running the business.
Absolutely.
And we would rather spend time, executing our strategies, running the business up today and figuring out what the business of tomorrow looks like. And they fully understand that's where my time's best spent.
The stock price will take care of itself.
Yes, sir. Yes,
right?
sir.
So the famous O'Reilly jingle, right? O'Reilly, right?
Yep.
It's memorable, right? Yep. Everybody knows it. So how was it created? And discuss other ways that O'Reilly's trying to keep the brand fresh and positive and great out in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's
So how'd that jingle get started, and what are you doing now to differentiate yourself?
Well, I wish I could say that we had this big master plan, and we spent a ton of investment dollars or marketing dollars on the jingle. Quite frankly, it was a local band in Springfield, Missouri that helped us record that kind of just on a whim. In 1998, about the time that we had bought Hilo. And it's one of those things that honestly, we didn't spend a lot of time and money on, but it just took. It's just kind of what some people call an earworm. Once you hear it, it's in your ear, and love it or hate it, it's out there. And so honestly, it's just been one of those things that I think was kind of meant to be, and it's been an amazing thing. And people young and old, sing it to me no matter where I go when they learn, where I work. And it's just been one of those iconic things that has just kind of built itself. And it's just one of those things that we feel very fortunate that it came to be the way it did. And so obviously it's still, I can't see a day that we don't play off of it. It's really good for our brand. It's good for our image, and people recognize it not only in the States, but, internationally. Sure. I have people mention it to me all the time. And to the root of your question, just about, our brand and protecting it and really making it what it needs to be for the future. We're pretty simple about the way that we go after our marketing and advertising dollars. We're pretty frugal, quite frankly. We've always believed that a little less SG&A spent on advertising is better spent staffing stores and giving great customer service. We feel like word of mouth is still the best advertising you can buy. And so we're pretty frugal, but our marketing and advertising team, led by Hugo Sanchez, that I know
Yeah.
They're a creative team. They get a ton for our spend every year. They're very creative. They have everything from outside the box thinking to really just the fundamentals of brand protection and really making sure our brand stays in a positive light. But, really, I go back to what we've already talked about, the best brand recognition and the best way to spread the word about O'Reilly from a customer and from a team member standpoint is continuing to have this culture alive and well, promote from within, give an excellent customer service. We still feel like just the basic fundamental blocking and tackling of selling auto parts and doing it well is the best advertising dollars we can spend.
Well, just as an observation, you can always spend more on B2B advertising.
All right, touche.
So it is a tradition on AMN DriveTime. We do something, Brad, called lightning round.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
And you're going to give me something right off the top of your head.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I hope I'm ready.
So from early on in your career, you touched on it, which was really great to hear. What was the favorite thing about being a parts specialist?
The gratification of having somebody come back and ask for you. Like that older gentleman that I grabbed that 442 251.
Hey, is Brad here?
Is Brad here? Like I just fell in love as a young man with the smell of the store, these old partsmen and women thumbing catalog racks on that front counter, memorizing part numbers, teaching me, again, as a rural market, here's what page in the precision book you go to in the back if you need to have a cross joint, for a four-wheel drive. Just that, learning those part numbers, learning what we do from a hard part standpoint, going the extra mile for a customer. I was told early on that, Brad, there's not a lot of ways you can lose your job at O'Reilly, meaning we'll be patient with you as a young kid, but saying no to a customer is one of them. And that stuck with me. Like that one sentence by my hiring manager told me that they're going to be patient with me, so it gave me confidence, but it also told me they're very serious about taking care of customers. And I just fell in love with that passion that everybody had for taking care of customers.
Yeah. You talk about the smell of the parts store. Like when I was selling tires, when you go back in the tire, there's a smell of tire and rubber. It's like it either can stand it or you can't.
Absolutely.
But when I was growing up in Akron, Ohio, you could, in the 70s and the 60s, you could smell the tires burning, the factories. And I'd say, Dad, what is that smell? He said, son, that's the smell of money.
Exactly.
So you're a Springfield guy.
Yep.
What's a hidden gem in Springfield, Missouri that people may not know about?
Yeah, that's a good one.
It could be a restaurant. It could be
that's a good one.
Theater. It could be.
I may go just outside Springfield.
Okay, so greater Springfield.
Yeah, number one, Springfield, I think, in the Southwest Missouri is a best kept secret. Because it's the Ozark Mountains. It's beautiful country. I'm a lake guy. I love, my family. I don't have a lot of hobbies, but when I'm not working, my family and I love to get out on Table Rock Lake.
Okay.
Table Rock Lake is where Johnny Morris really founded Bass Pro Shops.
Oh.
It was founded in Springfield, but it was hinged upon, it's just a great bass area for bass fishing. Table Rock Lake, all the Ozark lakes, there's a chain of Ozark lakes there, but Table Rock Lake is just about 45 minutes south of Springfield, and it is a beautiful lake. It's not overbuilt. There's restrictions on docks that keep people from just overbuilding, and it is just a beautiful place. It's really a special place. And then Johnny Morris, the founder and CEO of Bass Pro, he has just reinvested in our whole area in amazing ways. Obviously, the O'Reilly family and a lot of people have too, being our hometown, but Johnny Morris has done some really amazing things, and he's really built up an amazing golf community. A lot of people don't realize it there, but you have those golf courses, that Paynes Valley, where him and Payne Stewart's family, Payne Stewart's from Springfield originally.
I didn't know that.
He was.
I didn't know that.
And so his family has roots in that area, and so he's partnered with Payne's family on that Paynes Valley. He's partnered with Tiger on that course. Actually, Tiger had been involved in that course.
I didn't know this.
And so it's this best kept golf community for good golf trips. So if any of our folks in the industry looking for a good guys trip or a good family trip, Table Rock Lake, all the golf courses down there, and Big Cedar Lodge is really a special place.
That's cool. So you're a fisherman?
I do. I enjoy bass fishing. Yeah, I've got a bass boat and really enjoy being out there.
What is the most rewarding aspect of your role as CEO of O'Reilly?
The people, no hesitation. Me having the fortune to grow up here, There's not a day goes by. I'm human, we can all take things for granted, but Bill, there's not a day goes by, even in my new role, that I don't remember or think to myself, I don't have a job if it's not for these people, these 93,000 team members. And I grew up here, so I know that I don't have a job if it's not for what they're doing every day, taking care of our customers and our team members out in the field. And so the people, hands down. I, again, didn't even go to college. I mean, show me too many companies. There's probably one or two in our industry, or several family ran WDs and things like that. But as far as like Fortune 250 type companies, show me 4 or 5 that a young man from Muskogee, Oklahoma, that started here 17 years old, sweeping floors and putting up stock and didn't go to college, could grow up with this company and be our 4th CEO in company history. So I don't take that for granted. I remember and know that every day that me and my family don't have what we have, if it's not for our people. And so I love the people side of our business, and I love it. I love the people. It's a people business. It's a relationship business. And I take great pride in making sure that we never lose our culture, that we never lose our promote from within philosophy, because we've seen some do that. Make sure one day that I'm a long way from retirement, but when I hang it up one day, I want to feel that myself and the leadership team made the O'Reilly family proud, and that we made these 93,000 team members proud, because we're responsible for their job, for their families, for their income, for their benefits, for their retirement. And I take that very seriously.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Without sharing any secrets, okay? Because I'm sure you're a competitive guy.
Yep.
Is there any initiative you're currently working on that you're especially jazzed about?
Yeah, I think there's several. I think, and this is public knowledge, but we're really excited about becoming an international company. We acquired Mayasa down in Guadalajara, Mexico, back in 2019, and so we're really excited about the platform that we have down in the Mexican market. It's an amazing market for us. It's amazing aftermarket down there, as you well know. Average age of vehicles, where we're 12.8 in the U.S., it's 16.5 down there. And so huge opportunity for us, very competitive, but really excited about the market in Mexico. And then equally as excited about our partnership with the VAST organization, Group Del Vasto, that we acquired back in roughly 14 months ago, right at the time I took my new role. We had made a deal with Mauro Ciafelli, John Del Vasto, and those guys.
Yeah.
And we're equally as excited about the Canadian aftermarket.
Sure.
We're still very immature and young in both those markets. Still have a lot of work to do. Amazing competitors in those markets. So we're gonna take it slow. We have a lot to learn still yet. We have a lot of capabilities to put in place, but really excited about our international markets.
You mentioned it, but I'm going to ask you anyways. I think I know the answer. Favorite hobby?
Yeah, it would have to. The only thing that comes before probably bass fishing is just hanging out with my family. When you have an amazing bride like I do and my wife Megan, we have a great relationship. She's my hero in a lot of ways. She stays at home and takes care of our amazing kids. I have a strong faith, family, and O'Reilly Auto Parts. That's my priorities. I try to keep it simple, but I do love to bass fish, and I don't get to do it as often as I'd like. Really enjoy spending time with the kids and Megan, but yeah, when we're not doing things, I enjoy getting out there and getting a hook wet, for sure.
That's fun. Last thing. What are a few ways you achieve work-life balance? You got 5 kids, right? You said 5 kids?
Yep.
And you're working your tail off. What's the magic to make all that work?
Well, number one, a supportive wife. Like it wouldn't work without Megan. She is so supportive of me. She believes in our company like I do, and we all do. She's amazing, and so I have that great fortune. So she allows me to work a lot. I love what I do, so I enjoy working. Probably work more than I should at times, but again, love what I do. Take my new role extremely seriously. She puts up with not only the work commitment, but my travel and all that goes along with it. But I think generally, we O'Reilly has never been about just one person, meaning that, yeah, I'm the CEO, but we have an amazing leadership team and we all support each other. I have an amazing man in our company president, Brent Kirby, our CFO, Jeremy Fletcher, another longtime promote from within in our finance team. Jason Tarrant, our EVP of store operations and sales, he grew up with our company. Scott Ross, our CIO, et cetera. We have an amazing management team, and we all know that to hold each other accountable and to do the job we need to do, we have to have each other's backs and make sure we have time off and get the opportunity to unplug. And so I have a great team around me that allows me when I need to and when I should to take that break once a quarter or whatever the case may be to really spend quality time with Megan and the kids. And so we all support each other in doing that.
Brad, it's great to have you on AMN Drive Time, sponsored by our friends at Aishin.
Bill, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.